I never thought I'd see my daughter scrubbing floors in the house I bought her. The gate code still worked. That was my first surprise. I'd punched in the numbers, her birthday, backwards, like she'd always preferred, and the wrought iron gates had swung open without protest. The driveway curved through professionally landscaped gardens that I'd never seen before. Someone had money to burn on roses that probably cost more per bloom than most people's weekly groceries. The house looked different. Better, if I'm being honest. The exterior had been repainted in some fashionable gray-blue that probably had a pretentious name like Coastal Mist or Evening Harbor. New shutters, new lighting fixtures that gleamed in the afternoon sun. The place screamed money in that particular way that only generational wealth can manage. Understated, elegant, and completely inaccessible to people like me. I'd bought this property 3 years ago, saved for 12 years to make the down payment, worked doubles and triples at the plant until my back screamed and my wife begged me to slow down. But I'd wanted this for Emma, my daughter, my only child. The girl who'd gotten into Stanford with a full academic ride and then decided she wanted to study abroad for a year first. The house had been her graduation gift, her launching pad, her safety net. I'd signed it over to her the day she turned 23, 6 months before she married Derek Ashford. That should have been my first warning sign, a 23-year-old marrying into old money. But I'd been proud she'd found someone who treated her well, proud she seemed happy. I hadn't been invited to the house in 18 months. The last time I'd seen Emma was at a coffee shop near the university where I'd basically ambushed her between classes. She'd been distant, distracted, checking her phone every 30 seconds. When I'd asked about visiting, she'd made vague promises about soon and when things settle down. I'd driven home that day with a knot in my stomach that hadn't quite dissolved since. 3 weeks ago, my wife Patricia received a call from a former colleague who'd been hired to cater an event at the Ashford property. She'd seen Emma there, working, serving drinks, wearing some kind of uniform. Patricia had laughed it off at first. Maybe Emma was helping out. Maybe it was some kind of charity thing. Rich people did weird stuff like that, didn't they? Voluntarily serving food to show how humble they were. But the colleague had been insistent. Pat, she wasn't playing. She was working, and they were treating her like staff. So here I was, unannounced. Unwelcome, probably. But I'd had 18 months of excuses and evasions, and I was done. I rang the doorbell. Nothing. I rang again. The door opened, and a woman in her 60s stood there with the kind of expression that suggested I'd just interrupted something very important. She wore white linen pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her hair was silver blonde, styled in that effortlessly expensive way that requires a team of professionals. Yes? Her voice could have flash-frozen water. I'm here to see Emma. I kept my voice level, polite. Emma Ashford? Mrs. Ashford is occupied. Do you have an appointment? Mrs. Ashford. The words hit me like a slap. They'd taken her name, too. I'm her father. I stepped forward slightly, not aggressive, just present. I'd like to see my daughter. The woman's expression didn't change. Mr. Ashford is away on business. All contractor inquiries should be directed to... I'm not a contractor. My voice had an edge now. I'm Emma's father. I bought this house, and I'm coming inside. I didn't wait for permission. I stepped past her into the foyer, and my breath caught. The interior had been completely renovated. The warm hardwood floors I'd admired during the purchase had been replaced with cold marble. The walls were a stark white. Every piece of furniture screamed designer label. The whole place felt like a museum, beautiful, untouchable, sterile. And there, on her hands and knees in the living room, scrubbing at the marble with a cloth, was my daughter. She wore a gray uniform dress, the kind you'd see on housekeepers in old movies. Her dark hair, which she'd always worn long and free, was pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was thinner than I remembered. There were shadows under her eyes. "Kiddo," I said softly. "It's me." She looked up. Our eyes met, and I saw absolutely no recognition there. She stood quickly, nervously, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sir, I don't think you're supposed to be in here." Her voice was quiet, apologetic. "The main entrance is around back. For vendors and staff." The world tilted slightly. "Emma, baby, it's Dad." She frowned, confused, and glanced at the older woman who'd answered the door. The woman, I was starting to realize this must be Derek's mother, gave a tiny shake of her head. "I'm sorry," Emma said, turning back to me. "I think there's been some confusion. I need to finish this before..." "Before what?" I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice now. "Before your mother-in-law inspects your work? Before you get in trouble for talking to the help?" "Sir, please." Emma's voice was firmer now, though I could see her hands shaking. "You need to leave. If Mr. Ashford comes home and finds..." "Mr. Ashford," I interrupted, "is married to my daughter, in the house I bought. Emma, what the hell is going on?" The older woman stepped between us. "I'm calling security." "Do it," I said. "Call them. Call whoever you want. I want to know why my daughter is dressed like a servant in her own house." "Her house?" The woman's laugh was like breaking glass. "This is Ashford property, Mr." She paused, and I realized with a cold shock that she actually didn't know my name. "This property was purchased by my son's family trust. We have the documentation. Now leave before I have you removed." I looked past her at Emma, who was staring at the floor, the cleaning cloth still in her hands. "Emma, look at me." She didn't. "Emma!" She flinched at the volume and something inside me cracked. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. She answered on the first ring. "How bad?" "Worse." I was walking backward toward the door, keeping Emma in my line of sight. "Call Jenkins. Tell him it's time." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." I hung up and looked at the woman blocking my path. "I'll be back with lawyers, documentation, and every legal right I have. You want to play property games? Let's play." I walked out before she could respond, but I turned at the door for one last look. Emma was back on her knees, scrubbing the marble, her shoulders curved in defeat. "Ah," I thought. "Great. I bought a mansion, and apparently it comes with amnesia." The gates closed behind me with a definitive clang. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what I'd just seen. My daughter hadn't recognized me, or she'd pretended not to. I wasn't sure which was worse. My phone buzzed. Patricia. "Jenkins says he needs to see you tonight. He's been waiting for this call." "Good." "Michael." Her voice was careful. "Once we start this, we can't stop. You understand that?" "I understand." "What did you see?" I closed my eyes. I saw our daughter mopping floors while Derek's mother watched like she was evaluating livestock. Silence on the line. Then, "Burn them down." "That's the plan." I started the engine and pulled away from the house, from the monument to my good intentions that had somehow become a cage. But I wasn't leaving for good. I was leaving to plan, because I'd spent 12 years working toward giving my daughter a better life, and I'd spend the next 12 months destroying anyone who'd turned that gift into chains. The afternoon sun glinted off the house's windows as I drove away, and I thought about fairy tales, about castles and towers and princesses who needed saving. Except, this wasn't a fairy tale, this was war, and I'd just declared it. As the story unfolds, hit the hype button, like, subscribe, and write in the comments. Would you forgive them? Or walk away? Jenkins worked out of a strip mall office between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The sign on his door read, "Benjamin Jenkins, Legal Services," in letters that had faded to a sun-bleached gray. Most people drove past without a second glance. That was exactly why I'd hired him. Ben had been a public defender for 23 years before he'd burned out and opened his own practice. He handled the cases big firms wouldn't touch: landlord disputes, contract disagreements, property rights issues. He wasn't flashy. He didn't have a corner office downtown. But he was mean as a snake when he needed to be. And he understood how the system actually worked versus how it was supposed to work. Patricia and I arrived at 7 in the evening. The nail salon was closed, but light spilled from Ben's office windows. He answered the door himself, a short, compact man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. Michael, Patricia. He shook our hands and ushered us inside. Coffee? No. I sat down in one of the worn chairs facing his desk. How fast can we move? Ben settled behind his desk and pulled out a thick folder I recognized. We'd been building it for 8 months, ever since Patricia had first started to suspect something was wrong. Depends on what you want to accomplish, Ben said, and how much noise you're willing to make. I want my daughter out of that house and away from those people. She's an adult, Michael, legally married, unless she wants out. She doesn't know she wants out, Patricia interrupted. Her voice was tight with controlled fury. They've done something to her. Convinced her of something. I saw the way she looked at you, Mike. That wasn't defiance. That was fear. Ben nodded slowly. Walk me through what you saw today. Every detail. I did. The uniform, the cleaning, the blank look in Emma's eyes, the mother-in-law's proprietary attitude, the casual way they'd dismissed my connection to Emma as if I were some random stranger who'd wandered in off the street. Ben took notes, his pen scratching across a yellow legal pad. The house is in Emma's name? He asked when I finished. It was. I signed the deed over 3 years ago, 6 months before the wedding. Clear title, no mortgage. My name isn't anywhere on the current documentation. But you have proof of purchase? Every receipt, every wire transfer, every piece of correspondence. Patricia keeps records like she's preparing for an audit. Ben glanced at Patricia, who nodded. I have the original purchase agreement, the deed transfer, and Michael's employment records showing the source of funds, all clean money, all documented. Good. Ben made another note. Here's what I've found in the last 8 months while you've been patient. He opened the folder and pulled out several documents. The property was quit-claimed from Emma to Derek Ashford 7 months after their wedding. Then it was transferred into the Ashford family trust 2 months later. My hands clenched. She signed it over? According to the paperwork, yes, notarized and everything. But here's the interesting part. Ben pulled out another document. The notary is Derek's cousin. The witness is his brother. And the timing coincides with when Emma stopped responding to your calls regularly. Patricia leaned forward. Can we challenge it? Possibly. If we can prove coercion, undue influence, or that Emma didn't understand what she was signing. But that's a tough bar to clear. The bigger issue is the property modifications. He spread out a series of photographs across the desk. They showed the house's interior and exterior, before and after. Where did you get these? I asked. County Permits Office. Turns out the Ashfords have been doing extensive renovations without proper permits. Some of the structural changes required licensed contractors. Some of the electrical work needed inspection. None of it was filed correctly. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. How bad? Bad enough that the county could shut down occupancy until it's fixed. Bad enough that their homeowner's insurance is probably invalid. Bad enough that if someone wanted to make trouble. He looked at me over his glasses. Well, trouble could be made. What else? Ben pulled out more documents. The Ashford family trust is leveraged. Heavily. They've got mortgages on 3 properties, business loans, personal lines of credit. From the outside, they look wealthy. From the inside, they're drowning. How does that help us? Because Emma's house, your house, is the only property they own free and clear. It's their collateral, their safety net. Lose it, and the whole house of cards gets shaky. Patricia's expression was grim. They're using her. Looks like it, Ben agreed. And there's more. He hesitated. I did some digging into the family, talked to some people. The Ashfords have a reputation. What kind of reputation? The kind where Derek is the third son, the one who didn't quite measure up to his older brothers. The kind where the family money is more appearance than substance. The kind where they've been looking for an infusion of assets for years. Ben tapped the folder. Emma was that infusion. Smart, accomplished, and she came with a multi-million-dollar property. I thought about Emma on her knees, scrubbing marble floors. They isolated her, Patricia said quietly. Didn't they? Cut her off from us, convinced her we'd abandoned her, made her dependent on them. That's my working theory, Ben said, but proving it is another matter. What I can prove is permit violations, zoning issues, and possibly fraudulent property transfer. That's enough to cause serious problems. Whether it's enough to get Emma out, he shrugged. That depends on Emma. So what do we do? I asked. Ben leaned back in his chair. Option 1, we go soft. File a civil suit challenging the property transfer, request mediation, try to negotiate. It's clean, it's legal, and it'll take 18 months to 2 years with no guarantee of success. No. Option 2, we go hard. File complaints with the county about permit violations, request occupancy inspection, force them to deal with the property issues immediately. It'll be expensive for them to fix, disruptive, and public. It puts pressure on the situation. But Emma's still in the house, Patricia said. For now. But here's where it gets interesting. Ben pulled out another document. Your original deed had specific language about intended use. It was purchased as a single-family residence for your daughter. The modifications they've made, including adding what looks like separate servant quarters, may constitute a change of use that violates the original terms. I felt a smile that had nothing to do with humor. Meaning? Meaning we might be able to argue that the deed transfer was predicated on fraudulent misrepresentation, that Emma transferred a single-family home, but the Ashfords converted it into something else, which means the consideration for the transfer was invalid. English, Ben. They lied about what they were going to do with the property. That might void the transfer. Might. It's creative lawyering, and it's not guaranteed, but it's an angle. Patricia and I looked at each other. How long? I asked. To file the complaints? I can have them ready by tomorrow. To see results? The county will have to schedule inspections. 2 weeks, maybe 3. To actually get movement on the deed challenge? That's longer. But the complaints will shake things up immediately. Do it, I said. Michael, this is going to get ugly. The Ashfords aren't going to take this lying down. They'll hire expensive lawyers. They'll fight back. And Emma will be caught in the middle. She's already caught, Patricia said. At least this way she'll know we're fighting for her. Ben nodded and made a note. There's one more thing. You need to document everything, every interaction, every conversation. If you go back to that house, and I'm guessing you will, record it. I need evidence of how they're treating her. That's legal. In this state, you only need one-party consent for recording. You're one party. Just don't hide a camera in their bedroom, and we're fine. He closed the folder. I'll start the paperwork tonight. But Michael, Patricia, be ready. Once this starts, it's going to escalate fast. We left Jenkins' office as the sun was setting. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, the kind of sunset that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. We're really doing this, Patricia said as we sat in the truck. Yes. Good. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I've been ready for months. Ever since that first phone call. I knew something was wrong. Why didn't you say something sooner? Because you needed to see it yourself. You needed to know in your bones that this wasn't overprotective parenting or empty nest syndrome. You needed to see what they'd done to her. She was right. If she'd told me without proof, I might have dismissed it. Might have thought she was overreacting. But now, I'd seen Emma's face, seen the fear and confusion, seen my daughter reduced to something less than human in her own home. "We stop being the nice people," I said. "What?" "That's what you're going to tell me next, isn't it? Let's stop being the nice people they think we are." Patricia smiled, and it was a hard, dangerous expression I'd rarely seen on her face. Let's stop being the nice people they think we are. I drove home through suburban streets where other families were settling in for quiet evenings. Lights glowed in windows. I could see silhouettes of people moving through kitchens, living rooms, lives. We'd had that once. When Emma was young, before Stanford, before Derek, before everything had twisted into this nightmare. I parked in our driveway, a modest split level in a decent neighborhood, nothing like the mansion I'd bought Emma, but comfortable, paid off, ours. Patricia and I had lived here for 19 years. We'd raised Emma here. Her room was still upstairs, unchanged since she'd left for college, like a museum exhibit of a childhood that now felt like it belonged to someone else's family. Inside, Patricia went straight to her office, really just the spare bedroom we'd converted into a workspace. I heard her opening filing cabinets, pulling out folders. She'd been organized about this, systematic. While I'd been working doubles and saving money, she'd been documenting everything, creating a paper trail, preparing for a fight I hadn't even known was coming. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the photos on the refrigerator, held up by magnets shaped like vegetables. Emma at 5, missing her front teeth. Emma at 12, holding up a science fair trophy. Emma at 18 in her graduation gown, smiling so wide it looked like her face might split. In every photo, she was looking at the camera with clear, bright eyes full of confidence. Defeated eyes. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Stop harassing the Ashford family, or we will pursue legal action for trespassing and stalking." I showed it to Patricia when she came downstairs with an armload of folders. She snorted. "Jenkins needs to see that." I forwarded it to Ben, then blocked the number. Another text came through, different number. "Emma doesn't want to see you. Respect her wishes." I blocked that one too. 3 more texts came in rapid succession, all from different numbers, all with variations of the same message. "Stay away, leave Emma alone, you're not welcome." "They're panicking," Patricia said. "Good." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about property law and permit violations, and all the little legal weapons Ben had laid out like an arsenal. But I also thought about Emma on her knees with a cleaning cloth, and the way Derek's mother had looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. Around 2 a.m, I got up and went to my office. I pulled out the original real estate file from the house purchase, the photos from the listing, the inspection reports, the loan documents I'd signed with hands that had trembled from a mixture of pride and terror at the size of the debt. I'd gotten a good deal on the house. It had been a foreclosure, sold by a bank after the previous owners had defaulted. The property had been neglected, needed work, but the bones were good. I'd seen potential. I'd also seen Emma's future, a place where she could live while she figured out what came next. A foundation, stability. Now I was going to use that same property as a weapon. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone lit up with an email from Jenkins. Subject line, "Initial filings." I opened it and scanned the legal language. Complaint to the county about permit violations. Request for occupancy inspection. Notice of intent to challenge deed transfer based on fraudulent misrepresentation. It was bureaucratic, formal, and utterly devastating if you knew how to read between the lines. "Send it," I replied. Ben's response came back immediately. "Done. Complaints filed electronically. County will process within 48 hours. Inspector will contact the property owners within 10 business days." This is happening, Michael. I set the phone down and looked at my hands. They were scarred from years of factory work, calloused and rough. Working man's hands. not the soft hands of people who hired others to scrub their floors. These hands had built Emma's foundation. Now they were going to tear down the prison that foundation had become. Finding Emma turned out to be easier than expected, though not in the way I'd hoped. The next morning, I got a call from a number I actually recognized, Emma's cell phone. I answered before the first ring finished. "Emma, baby, where are you?" "Dad." Her voice was small, frightened. "I need to talk to you. Can you meet me?" "Of course. Where?" "There's a coffee shop on Riverside and 4th. The one with the blue awning. Can you be there in an hour? Just you, please." "I'll be there." She hung up. I looked at Patricia, who'd heard the whole thing on speaker. "It's a trap," she said. "Probably. You're going anyway." "Yes. Then I'm coming too, in a separate car. I'll park where I can see you." Jenkins, when I called him, was less supportive. "Michael, this is exactly what they want. They're going to record you, catch you saying something incriminating, use it to get a restraining order. Or Emma actually needs help, and this is her reaching out. Or that. But I'm telling you to be careful. Record everything on your phone, keep it visible, and for God's sake, don't threaten anyone." I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. It was a small place in an older part of town, the kind that served overpriced lattes to college students and freelancers. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a table near the window where I could see the street. Patricia texted, "I'm across the street in the bank parking lot. Visual on you." Emma arrived exactly on time. She looked worse than she had during the inspection, thinner, more worn down. She was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of the uniform, but her hair was still pulled back in that severe bun. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. "Hi, kiddo," I said softly. "Don't." Her voice cracked. "Don't call me that. You don't get to call me that anymore." "Emma, do you have any idea what you've done? The inspection, the violations, they're losing the house, everything they've worked for, because of you." "Everything I worked for," I corrected. "That house was my gift to you. I bought it. I paid for it. I signed it over to you, not to Derek. And I chose to share it with my husband. That was my choice. My right. Was it your choice to clean floors while his mother watched? Your choice to wear a servant's uniform? Your choice to stop recognizing your own father?" She flinched. "I didn't recognize you because you'd changed. You looked different. Older. Emma, I saw your face that day. You weren't confused about who I was. You were scared." "Of course I was scared. You showed up unannounced, aggressive, hostile." "I wasn't hostile. I was shocked to see my daughter being treated like hired help in the house I bought her." Emma's hands were trembling. She clasped them together on the table. "You don't understand. Derek's family, they've been so good to me. They welcomed me in, taught me how to fit into their world. I was just some scholarship kid from nowhere, and they made me part of their family." "By making you their maid?" "I wasn't their maid. I was contributing to the household. It's what you do in a family. Everyone contributes." "Did Derek contribute? Did Victoria? Or was it just you scrubbing floors?" Emma stood up abruptly. "This was a mistake. I shouldn't have called you." "Wait." I stood too. "Please, just listen for 1 minute. That house, they're claiming it's theirs. They transferred the deed into their family trust. They're leveraging it for their debts. They're using you, Emma, using your home, your future, as collateral for their failing businesses." "That's not true. I have the documentation. I've seen their finances. They're drowning in debt, and you were their way out. Stop it." "Emma, please." I said stop. Her voice rose, drawing looks from other customers. "You have no right to come into my life and accuse my husband of whatever you think he's doing. Derek loves me. His mother has been nothing but kind, and you abandoned me. You stopped calling, stopped visiting. You made it clear I wasn't important to you anymore. That's not true. Emma, I called you every week, for months. You stopped answering. You stopped returning messages. Because you were trying to control me, trying to break up my marriage. I was trying to stay in contact with my daughter. Emma's eyes were wet now. Derek said you'd say that. He said you'd twist everything, make yourself the victim. He warned me. And there it was. The poison they'd been feeding her. Emma, I said carefully, when was the last time you made a decision without asking Derek's permission? I don't need his permission for anything. When was the last time you left the house alone? She didn't answer. When was the last time you had your own money, your own phone, your own anything that wasn't filtered through Derek or his mother? You don't know what you're talking about. Then prove me wrong. Leave with me right now. Come to our house. Spend one night with your mother and me, away from Derek, and if you still want to go back tomorrow, I'll drive you myself. For a moment, just a split second, I saw doubt in her eyes, uncertainty. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it, and whatever softness had been there vanished. I have to go. Emma, goodbye, Dad. She walked out quickly, not looking back. Through the window, I saw her get into a black Mercedes that had pulled up to the curb. Derek was driving. He looked at me through the window and smiled. Patricia texted, I got photos of the car and Derek. Emma looked terrified. I sat back down heavily. My coffee was cold now. I felt nauseous. My phone rang. Jenkins. I'm coming to you, he said. Don't go anywhere. The deed challenge hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Jenkins filed an emergency motion based on new evidence, specifically Emma's hospitalization and the pattern of control documented by the social worker. The judge agreed to hear arguments. Sunday night, I went to the house. Not Emma's house. Our old house, the one Patricia and I had lived in for 19 years. I stood in Emma's room, which we'd left untouched since she went to college, and looked at the remnants of her childhood. Soccer trophies, science fair ribbons, a bulletin board covered in photos of friends, family, moments of happiness. This was the daughter I remembered, bright, confident, free. I took down one of the photos, Emma at 15, laughing at something I'd said while we hiked in the state park. Her face was open, joyful, unmarked by the shadows I saw in her eyes now. I put the photo in my pocket. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. The courthouse was downtown, a stern granite building that smelled like old paper and stale coffee. Jenkins met us outside, holding a thick briefcase. They'll have lawyers, he warned. Probably 3 or 4. They're going to argue that the deed transfer was legitimate, that Emma was of sound mind, that we have no standing to challenge it. What do we have? Everything we've documented. The timeline showing Emma's isolation, the medical records from her hospitalizations, the social worker's statement, the financial evidence showing the Ashford's motive, and most importantly, the original property documents showing you purchased the house specifically as a gift to Emma with no intention of it being transferred to anyone else. Is it enough? It should be. But Mike, even if we win, it doesn't mean Emma comes home. It just means the house legally reverts to her ownership. That's a start. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Thornton, looked like she'd been hearing cases since before I was born. She had sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the legal playbook. Derek and Victoria arrived with their legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits and an attitude of entitled confidence. Derek wouldn't look at me. Victoria stared openly, her expression radiating contempt. Emma wasn't there. Where's my daughter? I asked Jenkins. She's not required to attend. This is about the property transfer, not her specifically. Shouldn't she have a say? If she wanted to testify, she could. The fact that she's not here is telling. Judge Thornton called the hearing to order. Jenkins presented our case first, methodically laying out the timeline of events. The purchase of the house, the gift to Emma, the marriage to Derek, the gradual isolation and control, the deed transfer that happened when Emma was already showing signs of being manipulated. Derek's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Charles Whitmore, objected at every opportunity. Speculation, hearsay, irrelevant. Judge Thornton overruled most of the objections. "I'll allow it. Continue, Mr. Jenkins." Jenkins introduced the medical records, redacted for privacy, but showing the pattern of hospitalizations. He introduced the social worker's statement. He showed the financial records proving the Ashford's debt. "The pattern is clear, Your Honor," Jenkins argued. Emma Mitchell Ashford was isolated, manipulated, and coerced into signing over property that was specifically intended as her safety net. The transfer was done when she was vulnerable, without independent legal counsel, and witnessed by family members of the beneficiary. It bears all the hallmarks of undue influence. Whitmore stood to present the defense. He was smooth, practiced, every word carefully chosen. "Your Honor, what we have here is a father who cannot accept that his daughter has grown up and made her own choices. Emma Ashford is a 25-year-old woman. She chose to marry Derek Ashford. She chose to combine their assets. She chose to transfer the property into their family trust as part of sound financial planning. The fact that her father disapproves of these choices does not constitute grounds to overturn a legal property transfer." "What about the hospitalization?" Judge Thornton asked. "Mrs. Ashford is an active woman who sometimes overextends herself. The dehydration was unfortunate, but not indicative of any pattern of abuse or control. She was treated and released, as the medical records show." "And the timeline of isolation from her family?" "Mrs. Ashford and her father had a complicated relationship. She made the difficult choice to distance herself when he refused to accept her marriage. That's her right as an adult." The hearing went on for 2 hours. Witnesses were called. The social worker, who testified about her concerns, the notary who'd signed off on the deed transfer, who admitted under questioning that she'd done it as a favor to her cousin Derek without really reviewing the documents, a contractor who'd worked on the house and been asked to forge permit applications. That last one was new. Jenkins had found him over the weekend, a man named Ray Torres, who'd installed the deck and been told by Derek to backdate the permit application. "They promised me it was just a formality," Torres testified. "Said they'd filed the paperwork but lost it, needed duplicates. I didn't know it was fraudulent until I saw the news about the code violations." Whitmore tried to discredit him, but the damage was done. Judge Thornton called a recess. We stood outside the courtroom while she deliberated. Derek and his family clustered at the far end of the hallway, talking in low, urgent voices. "How do you think it went?" Patricia asked Jenkins. "I think we did well. The notary's admission helps. The contractor's testimony about the fraudulent permits helps. But ultimately, it depends on whether the judge believes Emma was coerced or if she's going to accept that an adult woman can make bad choices. What happens if we lose? Then the deed transfer stands. The house belongs to the Ashford Trust, and we have to find another way to get Emma out. And if we win, the house reverts to Emma's name only. The Ashfords lose their collateral, and the financial pressure becomes crushing." We waited for 45 minutes. Then the bailiff called us back in. Judge Thornton looked stern as we took our seats. "I've reviewed the evidence presented," she began. "This is a troubling case. On one hand, we have a legal property transfer that was properly notarized and recorded. On the other hand, we have evidence suggesting that transfer was obtained through undue influence during a period when the property owner was being isolated and controlled." She paused, looking at Derek. "Mr. Ashford, I'm particularly troubled by the testimony regarding permit fraud and the timeline of your wife's medical issues. While I cannot make findings about your personal relationship in this proceeding, I can say that the totality of the evidence suggests the property transfer was not made freely and independently." My heart started to race. "Therefore, I am granting the petition to set aside the deed transfer." The property at 1847 Greenwood Estate Drive is hereby restored to the sole ownership of Emma Ashford. The transfer to the Ashford Family Trust is voided. Mr. Ashford, if you wish to challenge this ruling, you may file an appeal within 30 days. Whitmore stood immediately. Your Honor, we object strenuously. Your objection is noted, but my ruling stands. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down. Derek looked like he'd been struck. Victoria's face went white. Their lawyers immediately huddled around them, talking rapidly. Jenkins was grinning. We won. Mike, we actually won. Patricia was crying, but this time from relief. We walked out of the courthouse into bright sunshine that felt like vindication. What happens now? I asked. The county records the judge's order. The property reverts to Emma's name within 10 business days. The Ashfords have no legal claim to it anymore. But they're still living there. In the hotel, I mean. But Emma's still with them. Not for long, Jenkins said. They've lost their major asset, their collateral. They're going to start defaulting on loans within weeks. The financial pressure is going to be enormous. How enormous? Jenkins pulled out his phone and showed me something, a legal notice he'd found online that morning. The bank that holds the mortgage on Derek's office condo just filed a foreclosure notice. They're 3 months behind on payments. They're collapsing. Like a house of cards. And Mike, when people are desperate, when they're losing everything, they make mistakes, they get angry, they turn on each other. That's when Emma will see them for what they really are. I hoped he was right. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number again. I was learning to hate unknown numbers. Mr. Mitchell? A man's voice, professional but tense. This is Officer Ray Kowalski with the City Police Department. I need to ask you about a report we received. My stomach dropped. What kind of report? Derek Ashford filed a police report claiming you've been stalking and harassing his wife. He says you showed up at their hotel room in the middle of the night, threatened him, and attempted to kidnap Emma Ashford. I need you to come to the station and give a statement. I looked at Patricia, who'd heard the whole thing on speaker. Her expression was grim. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said, and I'm bringing my lawyer. At the police station, Jenkins and I sat in a small interview room while Officer Kowalski reviewed Derek's statement. He claims you're obsessed with breaking up his marriage, Kowalski said. That you filed false complaints about his property, followed him and his wife, and shown up at their residence making threats. I'm Emma's father, I said, and everything I've filed has been legitimate. The property complaints were validated by a county inspector. The deed challenge was ruled in our favor by a judge this morning, and I went to the hotel because Emma called me asking for help. Do you have proof of that? I pulled out my phone and showed him the call log. 2:14 a.m. Call from Emma's number. I have the voicemail too if you need it. Kowalski listened to the voicemail, his expression neutral. Then he made notes on his report. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to be honest with you. This looks like a family dispute that's gotten out of hand. Mr. Ashford is claiming stalking and harassment. You're claiming your daughter is being isolated and controlled. I can't determine who's telling the truth based on these statements alone. My daughter was hospitalized for dehydration and malnutrition last week, I said. The social worker who evaluated her had concerns about her home situation. That's documented. You can verify it with the county. Kowalski made more notes. I'll look into that. But Mr. Mitchell, I need you to understand. Your daughter is an adult. She's married. Unless she files a complaint or asks for help directly, there's not much we can do. She did ask for help. That's why I went to the hotel. And then she texted you saying she wasn't ready to leave. That sounds like she changed her mind, not that she was being prevented from leaving. I wanted to argue, to make him understand, but Jenkins touched my arm. Officer, is my client being charged with anything? Not at this time, but I am issuing a warning. Mr. Mitchell, stay away from the Ashfords. Don't go to their hotel. Don't approach them in public. Don't contact Emma unless she contacts you first. If you violate this warning, Mr. Ashford can pursue a restraining order. So he gets to keep my daughter isolated and I can't do anything about it? I understand your frustration, but the law is clear. Emma Ashford is an adult with the right to make her own choices, even if those choices concern you. We left the station with the warning hanging over us like a threat. In the parking lot, Jenkins was fuming. This is exactly what they wanted. They filed a false police report to create a paper trail, to make you look like the aggressor. Now, if Emma tries to leave, they can claim you're kidnapping her. So what do? We stay within the law. We keep pressure on their finances. We wait for them to crack. And we hope Emma reaches out again before it's too late. I drove home feeling like I'd won a battle, but was losing the war. Yes, the house was back in Emma's name. Yes, the Ashfords were facing financial collapse. But Emma was still with them, still under their control, still being told I was the enemy. Patricia was waiting when I got home. Jenkins called me. He said the police issued a warning. Yeah. So we can't contact her. Not directly. Patricia sat down heavily. Mike, what if we can't save her? What if she's too deep in their control and she never gets out? Then we make damn sure there's nothing left for them to control her with. We take everything. We leave them with nothing. And eventually, Emma will see that the only people fighting for her are us. You sound so certain. I have to be. Because if I'm not, if I give up, then they win, and I'm not letting them win. That night, I lay awake thinking about Derek's face in the courtroom when the judge ruled against him. The shock, the rage, the fear. He was losing control, and desperate people did dangerous things. I thought about Emma in that hotel room, probably being told I'd tried to have Derek arrested, that I'd lied to the police, that I was destroying their family out of spite. And I thought about the photo in my pocket, 15-year-old Emma laughing in the sunshine, free and happy and whole. I was getting that girl back, no matter what it took.